Hello and welcome to this webcast on the topic What is a PhD? My name is Jana Dankovičová and I'm a career consultant at UCL Careers, and I'm one of the 3 specialist consultants who work with research students and research staff. So what we are going to cover in this webcast? Well, first of all, we'll talk about what PhD really is, what it involves, but also why you would want to do a PhD, how useful it might be, what you might learn from it. So possible benefits in terms of future careers. And finally, we'll look into some considerations for finding the right PhD once you decide this is the right thing to do for you. PhD is a research degree, and it's one of the different types of research degrees, the most well known. In some universities, such as Oxford universities, they use DPhil, although this is essentially the same thing. PhD can be done after the first degree or master's degree, and you will see when you look at advertised PhD places that most universities these days really do expect you to have a master's degree, not just the first degree. Competition for PhD places, and especially for PhD studentships, is very high. So you do need to have a pretty good academic track record. So first class undergraduate degree or good upper second class and or master's degree, and in some universities you will see that they would want you to have a distinction, and particularly a distinction for your master's dissertation. In the UK, PhD usually lasts about 3 years, and so ideally you would want to finish and write up your PhD within the 3 years. But it's possible to use the 4th year for writing up your thesis, which is the main requirement for doing a PhD. But increasingly, you can see that there are 4-year PhD programs, and those would have a taught element. So you would be doing various courses, even coursework, possibly even some exams, but each PhD really would have some training element, though it might be optional for a 3-year program, so you would have access to various training courses on research methods, on presentation skills, etc., whatever the university where you are doing PhD provides. Now, in many institutions, you wouldn't be calling yourself PhD student straight away. You would register as an MPhil student, and then after a year you would be expected to pass a so-called upgrade to start calling yourself a PhD proper. Now, what you would need to do to pass the upgrade is to submit a piece of work, maybe a chapter from the thesis, which is the main requirement for the PhD, and in some universities you would even have a viva, small viva, with that little chapter, and then you would be assessed whether you have the ability to progress to finishing a PhD. Now, I said that there are other types of research degrees, and this is the other one, professional doctorates. So they could be doctorate in engineering, in social sciences, in business, clinical psychology, etc. Professional doctorates are aimed really at professional careers rather than academia, and they include elements of a practical, work-related and professional nature, and they would have taught components also assessed by coursework. PhD can be done part-time, and in some cases students might not have much choice because of their personal circumstances, financial reasons, so they might not have full funding, so they might choose to do PhD part-time and work part-time to support their studies. Part-time PhD obviously takes longer, about 5 to 6 years. So what is a PhD? So as I mentioned a while ago, the main thing that you need to produce for your PhD is a dissertation. So PhD is a novel, original, in-depth study of a specific topic. Now, the originality is very important there. So you might choose to look at something that no one has done before, or you could look at a topic that is controversial in the field, or you might take a different approach to some topic. In any case, it needs to be an original, a substantial contribution to a specific field. Now, the results are written in the report, which is called thesis or dissertation, and the length of the dissertation varies partly across the subject and requirements of the institution where you are doing your PhD, but there is not normally determined minimum number of words. Sometimes you can see a maximum number of words. On average in science, you can see mentioned that it's between 40 and 50,000 words. In humanities and social sciences, it's usually more, but on average about 80,000 words, but no more than 100,000 words. So it's a substantial piece of work that you have to produce. Now at the end, when you submit your PhD, it's going to be assessed by experts. You will have an oral examination, which is called viva, and at that viva you will have 2 or more experts present. One of them will be external to the institution, and you have to defend your findings and have a discussion, professional discussion about your results and possible impact of your PhD. Throughout your PhD, you would work very closely with 1 or more experienced researchers. So they would be called supervisors. If you are a master's student, you are familiar with the concept of the supervisor, also for undergraduate thesis. In various institutions, you would have 1 or 2 supervisors. In some institutions, you might have even 3. And that is very useful because sometimes supervisors go on research leave and you don't want to be left alone, so you will have someone else to step in and you can carry on, of course, as normal with your PhD. Most PhDs are done at universities, although some types of PhDs that I will be mentioning in a different webcast, such as case awards, which are collaborative PhDs that are done in collaboration with non-academic institutions such as industry or research institutes, cultural heritage organizations. So those might have an element of PhD that is done at the institution itself. Now, as I was saying, PhD, the main part of it is writing a thesis, but you might need to do various courses. As I said, in the 4-year degrees, you might do a coursework. In some PhDs, you might be even required to do placements in a different organization. So why to do a PhD? Why would you want to do a PhD? Well, first of all, it's important to say that doing a PhD is not an easy thing to achieve. It's a 3-year work on a relatively narrow topic that might be done quite independently, so you might feel a bit isolated and there might be various obstacles. So you have to ask yourself whether you have the determination, the perseverance to achieve the PhD. Now, one of the major things you do need to have to do a PhD is to have a passion for the subject and for the topic and a real intellectual curiosity. So you might want to have PhD because it's your personal intellectual quest. So you really want to find out something more about a topic that you read about, or maybe it's a continuation of your master's dissertation. that started you on a certain topic, and now you want to go into greater depth and greater breadth as well. You need to be very focused. You have to be quite able to overcome various obstacles that inevitably can come, you can come across. You might want to do PhD partly because you want to teach at university, and you would need to have a PhD these days if you want to go into an academic career. You might also be thinking about academic career and as a research career, and you might take a PhD as a kind of apprenticeship in academia to see what doing a research is really like, because even if you apply for a lectureship, you would be expected to carry on doing research. But sometimes people want to do a PhD also because they want to get the research experience, learn new skills, even though they might not want to go into academia, but they want to have research skills. In any case, you are expected to be able to operate as an independent researcher at the end of your PhD, at the end of the entire process. Now, usually people have various reasons why they want to do a PhD, and some of them might not be entirely useful reasons, but that's okay unless those reasons are the predominant reasons. So as I said, having a passion for the subject and a real intellectual curiosity is a must if you don't want to be miserable for 3 or 4 years doing a PhD. But sometimes people decide to do a PhD because they feel under pressure from the peers. So if all your friends decide to do a PhD, some people don't want to be left out and they decide to do one as well. If that's your only reason why to do a PhD, that's really not a good idea. Another reason might be that you feel that your, for instance, master's supervisor is very pleased with you, is suggesting that you would do a PhD, and you don't want to disappoint. So you might want to do a PhD because you don't know what else you could be doing, someone else is thinking that you might be good, but you are lacking this passion for a particular topic. So having a indirect pressure from a supervisor as the only reason to do a PhD is not a very good idea. Now, maybe also someone else is trying to persuade you to do a PhD. Maybe your parents are putting some pressure. Maybe they never had a chance themselves to do a PhD and they always wish that you would have one. So please do avoid fulfilling the ambitions of others as the main reasons for doing a PhD. But you might be rebelling against people telling you you should go and get a job and start earning a salary, and you might say, no, I don't want people to tell me what I should be doing, and I will show them and I will do a PhD. Or you might be a type of person who thinks that you are brilliant and you know all the answers to the world, despite the fact that maybe your current supervisor or other people might be saying that your ideas are not workable or are not developed enough, or there is some other problem with them. So if you suffer from a misplaced genius complex, do not do PhD. Some people also think, oh, if I had a PhD, that would really increase the respect I would get from the world. To some extent, yes, you might get your credit card in a bank more easily, etc. But ultimately, you want to have respect not from the title, but from the work you achieved. If you want to do PhD only because you want to extend your student visa, that would not be enough to drive you through the 3 years of hard work. Similarly, if you want to do PhD because you just want to extend the number of years you study and you don't feel like looking for a job yet, that would not be the right motivation if that's the only reason why you want to do a PhD. So as I was saying, to do a PhD, if you have a real passion for a particular topic, you want to find out something more or something in more depth, and you have this curiosity, and you can focus for 3 years and be quite persevering, then yes, PhD is a very rewarding thing, and it might be the right thing for you to do. What are the possible benefits? Well, it allows entry to some professions. So, for instance, these days, if you want to be an academic, a lecturer, a researcher, etc., you would be expected to have a PhD. Or if you want to be a research scientist and in professions such as these. But PhD would be also very useful or even required in some other research careers outside academia. So if you want to be in a research position, for instance, in a think tank or in a research institute, working on policy and cultural work, an advisor, or in cultural institutions such as libraries and museums in a role as a curator, you would be expected to have a specialist knowledge and possibly a PhD as well. Among the other benefits would be, yes, greater credibility because of the work that you've done, a deeper and very specialized knowledge. You would really be a proper expert in the topic that you researched on, and the likelihood is that you would know more about it in the end than your supervisor. You would develop skills that would be transferable, such as research skills, critical thinking, project management, analytical skills, presentations, and presentation skills, etc. You would also attend conferences, so you would get to know academics from other institutions, other countries, that would give you international flexibility. So when you look for academic career, for instance, that is very global, you would be able to apply for jobs abroad as well. Now, in terms of what comes next, so if you finish your PhD, you might be wondering, what do the PhD graduates tend to do after they finish? So I have some data for UCL doctoral graduates from 2013. Now, there are about 5 top occupations that altogether 57% of UCL doctoral graduates went into. And you can see that the top are university researchers. So these are most commonly postdocs, so-called postdoctoral researchers. Then the next would be higher education teaching professionals, which would be lecturers, teaching fellows, etc. Researchers, and EC stands here for not entered, not otherwise classified, I think. Then medical practitioners, clinical psychologists. So this makes sense given how many students, PhD students, are in the area of biological sciences, medical sciences, etc. 38% of PhD graduates from 2013 then gone to other professions such as biochemists, medical scientists, psychologists, but also investment analysts, professionals in software development, for instance, journalists, editors, working as in publishing, etc. 5% go even to do further study. So there is further study you can do after PhD. But 39% of all UCL graduates from 2013 really stated their occupation to be in the bracket of a researcher. So that was UCL graduates. If you wanted to know what doctoral graduates do in general beyond your own institution, there are some resources you might want to look at. So, for instance, What Do Researchers Do is a publication put together by Evita, which is an organization that works with universities, researchers, and research organizations, and they occasionally do various useful surveys. So in this particular one, where you have the web link, you can explore destinations and career paths of doctoral graduates, I think even 3 years after they graduated. On our UCL Careers website, we also have videos from doctoral graduates that work in various academic and also non-academic roles. And the Vita that I mentioned above also have video case studies of doctoral graduates. So it's worth looking at for inspiration. Now, as I said, PhD is these days a prerequisite for an academic career. And lots of PhD students start off doing a PhD thinking that that's what they will want to do after a PhD. So I included this slide here, which is showing an academic career path in the UK. So you get an idea how you can progress if you get a position after PhD in academia. So after a PhD, you might want to do a postdoctoral study. There are two types. One, which is at the bottom and called postdoctoral researcher or postdoctoral research associate, is the most common postdoc. How it works is that academic in a university would apply for a research grant, which might be for 3 years, and then advertises a position for research associate, for a postdoctoral position, for a person who would do the actual work on the project. So here the project is given, and also the group would be given who you would be working with. The other type of postdoctoral study is a postdoctoral research or postdoctoral fellowship. Now these are different because in these you would have your own topic, so you would write a research proposal and you would apply to a research council for funding, usually for 3 years, to work on your own topic. These fellowships are very, very competitive, and so you would need to build up your research record and publications, etc., and have a very good research proposal to succeed. But if you do succeed to have a research fellowship, it does increase your chances for progress in academia afterwards. So lectureships is something that you can apply straight after a PhD. It's not very usual, especially in sciences. It used to be more usual in arts and humanities, for instance, and it can happen, but because there are not that many lectureships, you might want to do a postdoc before lectureship anyway. I put there as a probationary lectureship as a separate category, although that's not quite precise because it's a part of your lectureship employment. So if you are successful and get a lectureship position, the first 3 years usually you would be as a probationary lecturer, and then you would just carry on doing the job if you pass your probation as a lecturer. Then you can progress into senior lecturer or reader. The labels really depend on the institution, and then ultimately some people will make it to a professorial level. So that's a lecturer, which is a position in which you are expected to do research and teaching and admin and also apply for research grants. But another route in academia could be in teaching, as a teaching fellow. These positions these days are usually temporary positions, but that might change in the future, and some universities do have recognized career path as a teaching fellow, progressing into senior teaching fellow. So that was an academic career path in the UK. If you wanted to find out what it's like in other countries, there are some resources you might want to explore. One of them is from the European Academic Career Maps, LERU, which is a league of European research universities, and they provide an overview for several countries, European countries, of academic career paths. What positions are available in institutions in that country, what are the levels of responsibility, how the positions are funded, and things like that. European University Institute also on their website give a very useful information about academic career paths in 40 countries. So do check out this resource if you want to find out about academic careers in the EU. Now, finally, let's assume that you decided that PhD is indeed what you want to do. So what are the right questions to ask? Well, the most important thing that you need to decide is what's the topic you would like to research. And that will determine partly the next step, because obviously you would want to do your PhD in the institution that can help you working on that topic. So they might be an institution that has the right expertise, they have right facilities, but they also would have potential supervisors that are experts in your field. If you have an options, if there are several institutions of this kind where there is the right expertise, you still want to go to the best one, of course. So how do you find out what the research reputation is of the research group or department? Well, one of the things that you can do is to check how successful the department is in getting research funding, and that's usually would be mentioned on their website, and also their rating in REF. Now, REF stands for Research Excellence Framework, which is an exercise that the government imposes on all university departments to assess the quality of research. That is based mostly on the quality of research publications produced by the members of the department, and it's a very important exercise. The rating can determine the level of funding that the department is getting from the government in future 7 or 8 years, which is the period for which the RAF works, and then you would have another exercise several years later on. I put a website on the slide that you can check the results of individual departments in the latest REF, which was last year. You will also want to know how good are the facilities, so especially for science, how well equipped is the lab, what's the support. Also checking out whether you will get any formal training, what are the courses you can attend, what are the seminars, whether you will get some training in research methods and techniques, etc. You will be thinking, okay, what are the research skills I will be developing if I do research on this topic at this university with this potential supervisor? Are the departmental system in place if I need help? For instance, are there reading groups? Do they have a system of several supervisors to step in if one leaves, etc.? Now, as I was saying before, supervisor is an extremely important person in your life when you do a PhD. So, in many cases, when you are choosing the topic, you would also explore who might be your supervisor, and you would approach that person, get them interested, have a discussion. So when you are doing all that, there are several things you need to ask yourself. Can you get on with this person? Are they approachable? Do they have the right expertise? But also, are they available? Because you might want to choose someone who is very, very famous, but that also might mean that they will have less time for you. So how much they would be available for you, how amenable they might be, how open to your ideas, how flexible they are. So all these are important things to consider when you are looking for a PhD place and PhD funding. Now, this is going to be the amount of information covered in this webcast. There's going to be a separate webcast on the issues of funding where to look for PhDs, and then there will be further resources on our careers website to do with applications for PhDs. Among the useful resources here, I put some books, but also the website Find a PhD is very useful for advice, and then you will find lots of further resources on our website. I want to especially mention this website from Manchester University too, because that is a very, very good resource for academic careers in general, even at the stage of thinking about the PhD, because they have video interviews with academics, overviews various academic career paths, and practical advice for academic applications and interviews. But also do come and see us. We are based in the Student Central building in Mallet Street. We have websites, we do appointments for students. You can come and get your CV checked, we can have a career discussion with you, practice interviews, etc. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll see you in UCL Careers.